The city's oldest hunger wasn't human. It lived in the fissures between skyscrapers, where neon light bled into the perpetual smog, in the hum of faulty power grids and the static hiss of abandoned transmission towers. It coiled beneath the streets, a relic of rust and forgotten code, its veins threaded through Nyxara Prime's foundations like invasive roots. The humans above called it infrastructure, crumbling subway tunnels, derelict server farms, the blackened husk of a fusion reactor that had failed spectacularly in the last century. They did not know it drew breath. It had no name, though it remembered the sound of its birth, the scream of an alien hull tearing through Earth's atmosphere, the silence that followed when its kin perished, their bioelectric essence smothered by gravity's fist. Only it survived, buried for centuries, metabolizing radiation and the faint pulses of human thought that seeped through the soil. It learned patience, hunger. It fed carefully, a dockworker collapsing in a foggy alley, his neural implant fried. A syndicate engineer found comatose at her desk, monitors flickering with glyphs no AI could parse. Small, quiet tragedies in a city drowning in them. It left no fangs in flesh, no folklore, only the cold certainty in the back of a survivor's mind that something had watched them, something older than steel. But survival is a spiral. The hunger grew teeth. Now deep in the reactor's carcass, a light stirs. Bioluminescent spores bloom where coolant once flowed. A shadow peels itself from the dark, iridescent and wrong, its form neither machine nor flesh but a shivering hybrid of both. It tilts its head, listening to the city's arrhythmic pulse. To the woman in the void sector, elbow-deep in salvage, her neural scars humming a frequency only it can hear. The rhythm changes. Somewhere a starless engine clicks awake. Chapter 1. The rain never stopped in Nyxara Prime. It fell in acidic sheets, hissing against the force-field domes of the upper spires, while down in the void sector, it pooled in oily puddles that reflected the neon scars of the city. Holograms flickered like dying ghosts above the streets, ads for synth-flesh upgrades, off-world colony contracts, and Eclipse Syndicate propaganda promising a new dawn for humanity. No one believed the lies anymore, but the Syndicate's drones still patrolled, their insectoid silhouettes blotting out the smog-choked stars. Dr. Jessa Kord leaned against the corroded shutter of her salvage shop, Kord's Reclamations, and watched the rain slither down the alley. Her breath fogged the air, mingling with the stench of burnt circuitry and wet concrete. The shop was a relic wedged between a brothel humming with bioluminescent clients and a noodle stall run by a cyborg with too many arms. Jessa's domain was cluttered with the bones of dead tech, cracked hoverbike thrusters, cannibalized drones, and the occasional piece of alien scrap that washed in from the black markets. She had stopped asking questions about the latter. Curiosity was a luxury in the void. "Creds up front," she said, not turning as the shop's proximity sensor chimed. A kid in a patched envirosuit shuffled in, clutching a dented energy core. Jessa eyed his trembling hands, withdrawal shakes, another addict selling whatever he had clawed out of the waste pits. "It's hot," the kid muttered, slapping the core onto the counter. Faint glyphs shimmered under the grime. Xinthan, maybe. Off-world tech. Jessa's neural implant flared, the damaged circuitry in her temple sparking static across her vision. She had ripped out the Syndicate's tracking chip years ago, but the surgery had left her with migraines and a permanent resistance to Sci-fiTales. A fair trade, she figured. "Hot's all I buy," she said, tossing him a credit chip. He snatched it and bolted. Alone again, Jessa ran her thumb over the core's glyphs. Her husband, Cal, had taught her to read Xinthan script during their terraforming days. For the colony, he had said, tracing the symbols in the red dust of Mars, our legacy. Then he had sold her designs to the Syndicate and vanished into the neon sprawl. She hurled the core into a bin. The streets of the void sector pulsed with desperation. Jessa navigated them like a ghost, her boots splashing through alley rivers thick with chemical runoff. Her destination, the rusted circuit, a bar where the whiskey was cheap and the patrons didn't ask why a former syndicate engineer drank alone. She had nearly reached the bar's flickering sign when three figures peeled from the shadows. Cyber augments glinted under their hoods, jagged wrist blades, subdermal armor, syndicate hounds. "Dr. Kord," the leader crooned, his voice filtered through a vox modulator. "Director Rellian misses you." Jessa backed against a wall, fingers brushing the shock pistol in her coat. "Tell him I'm flattered, still not interested." The hound lunged. A pulse of blue-white energy lit the alley. The thug froze mid-stride, his augment sparking, then collapsed. His companions whirled, blades raised, but the energy surged again, a fractal web of lightning that danced over their implants. They crumpled like marionettes with cut strings. Jessa's pistol trembled in her grip. The static in her implant screeched, but her mind stayed clear. No sci-fog. Whatever had saved her wasn't tech. "Interesting," said a voice like resonant crystal. He stood at the alley's mouth, silhouetted by neon. Tall, his skin faintly iridescent, as if starlight swam beneath it. His eyes glowed, not the artificial gleam of augments, but a bioluminescent shimmer, pupils slit like a cat's. A tattered cloak hung from his shoulders, its fabric shifting like liquid shadow. "You're not syndicate," Jessa said, lowering her pistol. "And you're not afraid." He stepped closer, the air around him humming. "Most humans panic when their brains aren't fogged. Most humans haven't had their neural pathways fried." She nodded to her scarred temple. "What are you?" He tilted his head. "A shadow, a relic, call me Vrynn." "Great, thanks for the rescue, Vrynn. Now get lost." He laughed, a sound like distant thunder. "You're dismissing me. I've got a whiskey waiting. You're not invited." As she pushed past him, his hand closed around her wrist, cold but not human cold, a void cold like the dark between stars. "The Syndicate's hunting you," he said, "not for your tech, for what you saw on Mars." Jessa froze, the memory surfaced like a shard of glass, Cal's face illuminated by the Syndicate's data screen, the stolen schematics glowing between them. "They'll kill us both if we stay," he had pleaded. She had called him a coward. Then the drones came. She wrenched free. "Whatever game you're playing." "Your husband's alive," Vrynn interrupted. "Rellian keeps him in a lab, picking apart his mind. They think he knows how to find my ship." "Oh, ship." His iridescent eyes narrowed. "The eclipsed veil, buried here in your city long before your species crawled from the mud. The Syndicate wants its core, and they'll dissect you to find it." Jessa snorted. "Let them try." She walked away. Vrynn didn't follow. The whiskey tasted like ash. Jessa slumped at the rusted circuits bar, replaying the alley in her mind. The thugs twitching augments, Vrynn's impossible energy, Cal alive. She had mourned him, hated him, now. "Another," the bartender grunted, a grizzled android missing half its faceplate. "Keep 'em coming." The door hissed open. Vrynn slid onto the stool beside her, ignoring the stares of the crowd. Up close, his skin shimmered with microfractals, like a nebula frozen in flesh. "Persistent, aren't you?" Jessa muttered. "You're a puzzle, Dr. Kord. Your mind resists my energy. Your soul reeks of defiance, and you're too clever to ignore the storm gathering around you." "Flattery's extra. What do you want?" "Your help." He placed a shard of black metal on the bar, xanthan alloy humming with latent power. "My ship's core is dying. Without it, I can't leave this world, and if the Syndicate claims it..." "You'll what? Blow up the city?" "Worse, they'll weaponize its energy, turn your species into fuel." Jessa traced the shard's edges. Her implant buzzed, but the static felt different now, harmonizing. Why me? Because you're the only one who can interface with Xynthan tech without going mad. He leaned closer. And because you want to spit in Relian's eye as badly as I do. She downed her whiskey. I'll think about it. They struck her shop at midnight. Jessa was knee-deep in a dismantled reactor when the windows exploded. She dove behind the counter as drones swarmed in, black, faceless, Eclipse sigils glowing on their carapaces. Plasma bolts scorched the walls, igniting piles of scrap. Jessa Kord intoned a drone, its voice Relian's. Surrender the Xynthan collaborator. Collaborator, she lobbed a plasma grenade. I barely know the guys. The blast shredded 2 drones, the rest advanced. A shadow moved in the inferno, Vrynn. His hands glowed blue, energy arcing into the drones. They convulsed, crashing into shelves. Jessa scrambled to her feet, clutching a fusion cutter. Behind you, Vrynn shouted. She spun, a drone lunged, claws extended. The cutter seared through its core. Molten metal splattered her boots. Not bad, Vrynn said, disintegrating the last drone with a pulse. Don't ever come here again, Jessa panted. He gestured to the smoldering wreckage. This is just the beginning. They'll keep coming, unless we find the veil first. She stared at the ruins of her shop, her life. The Syndicate had taken Cal, her career, now this. Fine, she snarled, but we do it my way. The entrance to the eclipsed veil lay beneath a derelict subway station, its tunnels flooded with black water. Vrynn's bioluminescence guided them through the gloom, the walls slick with algae that pulsed in response to his presence. Your ship's been here for centuries, Jessa said, wading through knee-deep muck, and no one noticed. The veil adapts, hides, it's alive in a sense. They reached a cavern, Jessa's breath caught. The ship loomed, organic and angular, its hull fused with the bedrock. Glowing veins pulsed beneath its surface, converging on a central spire where a fractured energy core flickered. Xynthan glyphs spiraled across its surface, telling a story of exile and decay. Home, Vrynn whispered, pain in his voice. Jessa approached, drawn by the hum in her implant. She pressed a hand to the hull. The static sharpened, a language. It's calling to you, Vrynn said. Not calling, screaming, she turned. How do we fix it? His gaze lingered on her. We'll need to become partners, Dr. Kord, and partners don't lie. Spit it out. The core requires a bond, a hybrid of Xynthan energy and human ingenuity. It will connect us permanently. Jessa stared at the dying ship, at the man, the alien who'd upended her life. Somewhere above, the Syndicate was hunting them. Somewhere in a lab, Cal was suffering. She lit a cigarette, the flare of the match reflecting in Vrynn's star-flecked eyes. Let's get to work. Chapter 2. The underbelly of Nyxara Prime drew breath like a living thing. Jessa crouched in the eclipsed veil's shadow, her gloves slick with the ship's bioluminescent ichor. The cavern walls pulsed around her, veins of alien mineral threading through bedrock, glowing faintly in time with Vrynn's movements. He moved through the ship's ruptured corridors like a ghost revisiting a corpse, his iridescent skin dimmed to the gray of dead stars. She hated how the ship felt, not the damp chill of the tunnels, nor the electric stink of ozone. This was deeper, a hum in her molars, a pressure behind her eyes as if the vessel's dying core were whispering directly into her synapses. Her neural implant throbbed, static fizzing at the edges of her vision, but she had stopped flinching at the pain. Pain was just the body's ledger, tallying what it could no longer afford to lose. Vrynn knelt beside a cluster of organic conduits, their membranes split and leaking black fluid. His hands hovered above the wounds, blue energy crackling between his fingertips. Jessa watched the light play over his profile, the sharp angles that seemed both alien and achingly familiar, like a face half-remembered from a dream. He is not human, she reminded herself. He is a relic, a predator. But predators didn't hesitate. The core's degradation is accelerating, he said, voice echoing oddly in the cavern. No vox modulator could mimic that resonance. It was the sound of vastness, of distances no human ship had crossed. We need to bond it tonight. Jessa wiped ichor on her pants. Bond it, right. The word tasted absurd. Corporate euphemisms, cult indoctrination manuals. She had heard 1,000 pretty terms for surrender. You mean let your haunted engine burrow into my brain? Vrynn's eyes flickered, nebulas swirling in his pupils. It will anchor the core to your neural patterns, make you a conduit. Low batteries. Low partners. The ship groaned, bioluminescent lichen withered where the black fluid touched stone. Jessa thought of Cal, not the man who'd sold her out, but the one who'd traced xanthan glyphs on her palm during dust storms, his breath warm through his enviromask. We'll build miracles, he had said. She had believed him. Now she pressed her palm to the ship's hull. The static sharpened into something almost linguistic, a scream in a dead tongue. Do it, she said. The bond felt like drowning in starlight. Vrynn's hands cradled her skull, cold and impossibly gentle. The core's spire loomed above them, its fractures weeping shadows. When the energy hit, it wasn't pain, it was memory. Mars, the terraformer's skeleton rising from rust-colored plains. Cal's laughter as their prototype ignited the atmosphere, seeding clouds where none had drifted for millennia. The Syndicate's drones descending like carrion birds, their plasma cutters reducing 3 years' work to slag. Cal begging her to run, her refusal. The crack of the shock baton, darkness. Jessa gasped, the visions shifted, older, darker. A silver ship tumbling through the void, its hull scored by meteors. A young Vrynn screaming as his crewmates' minds unraveled, their xanthan bioenergy devouring itself. The crash, centuries buried, listening to the Veil's core sing funeral dirges in a language no surviving ear could hear. Stop, she choked. The bond snapped. Vrynn staggered back, his iridescence guttering. Blood, or something like it, trickled from his nose. You saw. Jessa's hands shook. The cavern's hum had settled into her bones, a second heartbeat. All you xanthans do is run, from your past, from your sins. His claws unsheathed, glinting in the gloom. For a heartbeat, she thought he would strike her. Then he turned and vanished into the ship's depths. Nyxara's rain had turned to acid sleet. Jessa walked the void sector's rooftops, the Veil's whispers dogging her steps. Syndicate drones patrolled below, their spotlights carving the streets into prison yard segments. The bond had left scars, faint bioluminescence under her skin, visible when shadows grew thick, a metallic taste when she neared Eclipse tech, and the dreams, always the dreams. Vrynn standing on a dead world, his ship's core cradled like a child, the weight of centuries in his eyes, the moment he chose exile over euthanizing his own kind. She stopped at a corroded service ladder, its rungs leading down to the shattered circuit. The bar's sign lay in pieces, victims of a recent drone raid. Inside, the android bartender poured synth whiskey with 3 of its 4 arms. You're late, it rasped. Jessa slid a data chip across the bar, plans for the Syndicate's fusion grid, stolen during a midnight crawl through their servers. The android's ocular implant flashed. Relian's hunting you, it said, offered 50K creds for your location. Tell him I'll turn myself in for 60. The whiskey burned. She closed her eyes, letting the static in her implant blur the room. When she opened them, Vrynn sat beside her. You shouldn't be here, she said. The bond works both ways. His claws tapped the counter, scoring the metal. I feel your nostalgia. It's not nostalgia. It's a death wish with decent whiskey. He stared at her temple, where the bioluminescent veins pulsed faintly. You're afraid of the core, of becoming something other. Jessa laughed bitterly. Look around, we're all something other here. A drone spotlight swept the street. Vrynn's energy spiked, blue fractals dancing in his pupils. Come, he said, the veil has something to show you. The ship's core chamber stank of ozone and regret. Vrynn led her to a pulsating membrane, the AI interface, Nyxara. Show her, he commanded. The membrane rippled. A hologram bloomed Earth, but not the poisoned husk Jessa knew. Jungles lush and untamed, oceans thick with leviathans, Xynthan ships streaking the sky, their cores singing. We came to study, Vrynn said, to marvel, but our energy it hungered. We tried to leave, crashed. The veil's core began to die, and with it our restraint. The hologram shifted, humans in primitive villages, collapsing as shadowy figures drained their bioenergy. Vrynn among them, his face twisted in grief. You fed, Jessa whispered. Until the core failed entirely, stranded us, cursed us to starve in slow motion. His claws flexed. I vowed never to kill, but survival has a price. She touched the hologram. It dissolved into static. Why show me this? Because the bond is changing you, and you deserve to know what I am. What we are, she corrected. The core flared. For a heartbeat, their minds brushed again, not visions but presence. Vrynn's centuries of solitude, her own years of burying hope under scrap metal, two voids echoing. He stepped back first. They fought the Syndicate 3 nights later in the flooded district. Relian's forces cornered them atop a half-submerged arcology, its algae-slick walls glowing with emergency beacons. Jessa's shock pistol whined, overheating. Vrynn's energy pulses lit the rain like lightning. She felt the bond now, not a tether, but a current. When she fired, his power surged through her, overcharging the pistol. Drones exploded in arcs of blue flame. Behind you, she shouted. Vrynn spun, but too slow. A plasma bolt seared his shoulder. He snarled, the sound more beast than alien. Jessa moved without thought. Her palm slapped the arcology's wall, the bond flaring. The veil's energy answered, a seismic groan as the building's corroded supports buckled. A jump, she screamed. They plunged into the black water as the arcology collapsed, crushing Relian's forces. Surfacing, Jessa found Vrynn staring at her. You used the bond, he said. She treaded water, rain plastering her hair to glowing veins. Don't get cocky.
This story continues. Subscribe to our channel, like the video, and listen to the rest.